we had it. From January 21st, 1976 to October 24th, 2003, we had a commercial supersonic passenger plane called Concorde. Today, it takes 7 hours to fly from New York to London. On the Concorde, it took about 3 hours and 30 minutes, just under 3 hours if it was record time. A journey that would have taken the Titanic 137 hours had become just barely long enough to watch Titanic while crossing the Atlantic. The Concorde came to represent class, style, and the miracle of engineering. Here's a normal plane landing, and here's the Concorde landing. Which one are you looking at? With Concorde, we all looked up and pointed, and then in 2003, it stopped. We had commercial supersonic flight and just let it go. Why? Why did the Concorde become a museum exhibit? This is the Smithsonian's Concorde, and the curator who got it flew on it, too.
I did see, the color of the sky at 60,000 feet. This is this most gorgeous, deep, deep purple.
How did a breakthrough become a piece of memorabilia? The answer says something about how innovation really sticks, and it's complicated.
I've got a personal interest in the SST, and I'd like to tell you about it.
SST equals supersonic transport, any transportation that's faster than the speed of sound. It became a dream after Chuck Yeager broke the sound barrier in 1947, and a technological race in the 1950s and 1960s combined Cold War competition with a classic mid-century faith in engineering. Americans, Russians, and the British and French governments dumped hundreds of millions of dollars into supersonic R&D. Think rooms full of engineers in short sleeves and ties. The then Seattle-based Boeing won the American design contract in 1967. That's where a certain basketball team got its original name.
Supersonic, win the game!
But development stopped after a 1971 funding cut. Russia's effort, the Tupolev Tu-144, flew, but it was grounded after an extraordinarily spotty record over just 55 flights. But there was a winner.
Concorde, the paper dart jetliner conceived jointly by Britain and France to shrink the world and cut air journey times in half.
From the beginning, Concorde was a marvel of design. It wasn't designed with computers, but through math and trial and error. They had to innovate constantly to make a supersonic passenger plane possible.
The airplane needed to be very long and narrow to go supersonically comfortably.
And the paint was twice as reflective as other jets, just to compensate for the heat from air friction.
Because you're traveling at Mach 2, twice the speed of sound, even though you're at 60,000 feet, the airframe would actually heat up dramatically. So I actually, touched the window. It wasn't warm, it was hot.
Fuel flowed around the plane during flight to adjust its center of gravity for takeoff, cruising, and landing.
So these pumps are working the whole flight, but you can't tell.
But it was the beautiful wing that distinguished the Concorde for its greatest fans.
It's a delta wing, but it's called an ogival delta wing because of its unique shape.
Delta because it was triangular, like the Greek delta, ogival to reference its curve. The delta wing helped the Concorde get lift at takeoff and limit drag while in flight. The rest of the plane compensated.
The one compromise in it required the aircraft to have a very high angle of attack on takeoff and landing.
Since pilots couldn't see out of the plane because of angled landing, engineers put together a solution.
The Concorde featured a droop snoot.
Droop snoot?
Yeah, the snoot would droop.
The snoot drooped.
The reason being that it was a delta wing design and it had a very high angle of attack on landing. So in order to see, they were able to lower the nose.
It flew at Mach 2, more than 1,300 miles an hour, faster than the Earth spins.
You couldn't tell. The only way you knew you were doing Mach 2 was that they had a Mach meter up on the bulkhead. And everybody was focused on that because it would creep up. And as soon as it went Mach 1, everybody would break out into applause.
To minimize drag, it soared so high you could see the Earth's curve. The Concorde defined the glamour of high-speed flight.
Now, this is a very important part of the seven-piece wardrobe, this washable dress that you wear in hot climates.
And it had the admiration of celebrities like Sting.
Well, it's always exciting flying supersonic, and it's always exciting to get to New York before you've left.
It was a stratospheric cocktail party.
Normally people complain about how bad the airline food is. I will attest in this case, that was not true. This was one of the best meals I ever had. It worked beautifully. A normal French meal takes 2.5, 3 hours. Well, by the time dinner was over, we were here.
So, what went wrong? On July 25, 2000, the Concorde punctured a tire during takeoff for Air France Flight 4590. 113 people died. Though failure happened shortly after takeoff, it was due to a problem specific to Concorde tires. The plane was grounded until November of 2001. By that time, the September 11th attacks had already depressed the industry. But while both tragedies did affect Concorde, there are only a couple of pieces of the fundamental challenges for the plane. Noise levels on takeoff were high, but massive supersonic booms had no comparison. In the 60s, the Air Force ran a test of sonic booms over Oklahoma City, and residents reported hundreds of damaged windows and noise disturbances. All that meant limiting supersonic flight to above the ocean. There would be no New York to LA Concorde. That's part of what quashed the American supersonic experiment with Boeing, and it limited demand for supersonic planes from the beginning. Noise concerns were paired with environmental concerns.
There will be severe environmental damage to the ozone layer.
The plane's high flight pattern made scientists think its exhaust gas could be more threatening to the ozone than normal jets.
What was noticeable was that you kept climbing and climbing and climbing. We're flying much higher than a normal airliner.
A massive fleet of supersonic planes probably would have caused real damage, setting red flags for a supersonic future. Fuel requirements also limited range to transatlantic journeys without any trans-Pacific cash cows. It guzzled enough fuel that price fluctuations could hit particularly hard. With ticket prices as high as $12,000 a seat, that was a significant risk, and tickets had to be expensive since at most, only 120 passengers could fit on the plane. It couldn't distribute the price tag. That was compounded by the need for specially qualified crew members and maintenance that came at a premium. And it was all for a very demanding crowd.
Air France and British Airways had to position a spare Concorde in New York in case the flight back had problems. So there's an airplane sitting on the ground, not making any money, just in case. Because Concorde passengers expect, to walk onto a Concorde because they paid a lot of money to it.
None of these factors stopped the Concorde, but they all boxed it in until it had nowhere to go but down. When Air France and British Airways announced the Concorde's closing on April 10, 2003, it wasn't about the past, but the future. The manufacturer, Airbus, decided supporting the Concorde was impossible. An aging Concorde, it still had analog controls and a flight engineer, both of which newer planes had lost, would cost too much to upgrade or redo. In a way, Concorde's economics were similar to this toy model's economics. I got it for $10 because the manufacturer could distribute the cost of factory workers, tooling, and distribution over thousands of cute planes. Airbus loves doing the same with its family of jets. Even if a flight were profitable for an airline, the airline couldn't afford a new small batch of airplanes. All the factors that boxed in Concorde kept its scale so small it would be wildly unprofitable to service, rebuild, or revive. The best option was to land for good. We like to think breakthroughs only end because of disaster, with a crash. But they can fall short without disaster, despite a breathtaking wing or a jaw-dropping droop snoot. They have to come with a business model and supply system, a political resolve, and a plan to expand. Even as future dreams for supersonic transport simmer, all those business model questions remain unanswered.
They don't exist unless they make money. Some people don't like that idea, but it's a fact of life. They're there to make money. And if they're making a product that doesn't make them money, they'll either stop making it or they'll go out of business, or both. You never know.
So the flight time to London can return to a double feature slog. But we lose something with the drudgery. Progress slows, and we have to wait for something else to look up at. Something worth pointing at. So I have fallen completely in love with the Concorde, but it was not that comfortable of a ride. Bob told me that while the legroom was pretty good, the headroom was not, and neither was the seat width. It was kind of like a coach seat, and you can see that in this video of Sting. He looks pretty cramped, especially for Sting.